He walked into my quiet life with a worn-out smile and one strange request. Just pretend to be my fiancée. Just for one dinner with my parents. I said yes. Harmless, right? I had no idea what he was hiding, or what this lie would cost me. Stay with me as I tell you how one small favor turned into something much bigger than I ever expected. My name is Hannah Walsh. I'm 29, and I work as a dental assistant in a small Vermont town. Life here is simple, predictable. Honestly, it's been the same for years. Work, home, repeat. I don't talk to many people, and that's always been okay with me. Or at least it used to be. Then one afternoon, Caleb Hart knocked on my door. He rents the apartment upstairs, a carpenter, always covered in sawdust, always polite but distant. We'd shared a few nods in the hallway, maybe a smile or two, but nothing more. That day, though, he looked nervous. His hands were in his pockets, and he couldn't quite meet my eyes. I know this is strange, he said, but I need a favor. A big one. I just stared at him, unsure what he was about to ask. I need someone to pretend to be my fiancé, he said. Just for one dinner. With my family. My mom passed away recently, and before she died, I promised her I'd make peace with them. They don't think I've moved on from things, and I need them to believe I have. It sounded ridiculous, but he wasn't laughing. He looked tired, like someone carrying too much. I hesitated. Who asks a near stranger to be their fake fiancé? There's no pressure, he added quickly. It's just one night, one dinner. I'll drive us, handle everything. No expectations, I promise. Maybe I should have said no, but part of me was curious. And the truth? I didn't have much going on. I'd been in a rut for years. And there was something about the way he looked at me, like he wasn't telling me everything, but still needed someone to say yes. So I said, okay. He looked surprised, relieved. Thank you, Hannah, he said softly. You're helping more than you know. I didn't know what I was walking into. Didn't know the layers beneath his quiet voice or the shadows behind his smile. I thought I was doing a kind thing for someone in need. But I didn't realize that night would be the start of something far more complicated and far more painful than I ever imagined. The night of the dinner, my nerves were on fire. I wore a simple dress, nothing too fancy, but enough to look like someone who could be someone's fiancé. Caleb picked me up right on time, quiet and polite as always. He looked sharp, like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for small-town man meets big family dinner. But behind his calm, I saw the tension in his jaw. The house was huge, old, elegant, and cold, not just in temperature but in feeling. The kind of place where people smiled with tight lips and said things that didn't mean what they sounded like. Caleb introduced me to his family. His father, Charles Hart, a retired lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, looked me over like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't apply for. His older brother, Marcus, didn't bother hiding his smirk. He shook my hand and immediately made a comment about how fast things must have moved between us. His sister, Ellen, was different. Kind eyes, soft smile. She hugged Caleb tightly and welcomed me with warmth. But she also looked at me like she knew something wasn't quite right. Still, she said nothing. Dinner was a stiff, uncomfortable affair. Caleb's father asked pointed questions about our relationship, how we met, how long we'd been together, what our plans were. Caleb answered smoothly, too smoothly. I followed his lead, nodding and adding small details we'd agreed on during the car ride. Then I saw it, an old photo hanging in the hallway, Caleb with a woman who looked almost exactly like me. Same brown hair, same smile. It felt like my stomach dropped. I looked at Caleb, and he quickly turned away, pretending he hadn't noticed me staring. Back at the table, the conversation turned icy. Marcus made little jabs at Caleb's career. Charles asked if I planned to keep working after the wedding. Before I could answer, Caleb gently squeezed my hand under the table. I looked at him, his jaw clenched, his eyes avoiding mine, and I realized this wasn't just awkward. This was something deeper. As the evening ended, Charles leaned back in his chair and said, "Why don't you two stay the weekend at the lake house? It's been too long since we all spent time together." I froze. That wasn't part of the plan. Caleb leaned in close and whispered, "You don't have to say yes." But I looked at him, really looked at him, and something in his face, something broken, maybe even scared, made me nod. "Sure," I said softly. "We'd love to." I didn't know then how many lies were buried in that house, or how staying would change everything. The lake house was beautiful, quiet, and far too perfect for the storm brewing inside it. From the moment Caleb and I stepped in, the air felt heavy. It wasn't just the tension from his family, it was something deeper, something unspoken that pressed on my chest like a weight I couldn't name. The first morning, I wandered into the library while everyone was still asleep. The shelves were filled with family albums, awards, and photos that looked like memories frozen in glass. One caught my eye. Caleb, smiling, younger, standing beside a woman in a white dress at what looked like an engagement party. She looked exactly like the woman from the hallway photo. I picked it up, and saw the inscription, Caleb and Rachel, 2 months to go. My stomach dropped. Rachel. Later that day, I saw her in person. She arrived with Marcus. My fake fiancé smile froze on my face as she walked through the door, holding the hand of Caleb's older brother. No one explained. No one needed to. I could see it on Caleb's face the moment they entered. Rachel had been his, and now she was Marcus's wife. I waited until we were alone on the back porch to ask him, "You didn't think I deserved to know?" I said quietly. Caleb looked away. "It doesn't matter anymore." "Doesn't matter?" I laughed bitter. "You asked me to play your fiancé, Caleb, and you didn't think telling me your real ex-fiancé would be here, married to your brother, was important." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I didn't think you'd say yes if I told you the truth. So you used me," I said. His silence was enough of an answer. I needed them to believe I was over it," he finally said. "Over her. Over everything. And am I just your stand-in?" I asked, eyes burning. "No," he said quickly. "At least, that's not what I wanted it to be anymore." I didn't trust him, not then. But I didn't walk away either. I was already here. Already playing the part. And now, maybe I had a role to play for myself. I decided I'd keep pretending. Not for him, but for me. To find out what really happened between these people. Marcus didn't make it easy. He teased Caleb constantly. Snide comments about the past. About Caleb, finally finding someone who could put up with him. Rachel avoided eye contact with Caleb the whole time, but her silence said enough. That night, as we sat near the fireplace, Marcus made a toast. "To second chances," he said, looking directly at Caleb. "Some of us actually get them." I gripped Caleb's hand under the blanket, not out of love, not yet, but because I could feel him breaking. And I wasn't ready to let go. Not until I knew everything. The next morning, I sat on the dock alone, watching the lake ripple in the wind. The quiet should have calmed me, but my thoughts were loud. Pretending to be someone's fiancé had started as a favor. Now it felt like I was playing a part in someone else's life, one I didn't understand. Ellen came out with 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside me. She didn't ask questions, just handed me the warm cup and waited. "You ever feel like you're always the one left behind?" I asked suddenly, surprising even myself. She looked at me gently. "Sometimes." "Why?" I told her, not all at once, but piece by piece. About how my last boyfriend cheated on me with someone louder, flashier. How he said I was too steady, like it was a flaw. How I gave my all to people who never chose me back. I stayed in a relationship for 3 years because I thought one day, maybe I'd matter enough, I said. But I was just invisible, background noise. Ellen didn't say much, but her presence felt kind, real. Later that day, Aunt Judy found me in the garden, trimming dead roses. She was in her 60s, with a sharp wit and eyes that missed nothing. "You have a quiet strength," she said out of nowhere. "That scares people like Charles." I blinked. "Charles?" She nodded toward the house. "He built a world where silence keeps the peace. But not all silence is harmless." It felt like a warning, soft but clear. That evening, Caleb found me by the kitchen window, staring out at the dark lake. He looked tired, like the weight of everything was finally catching up to him. "I need to say I'm sorry," he said. I crossed my arms. "For what exactly?" "For using you. For not telling you about Rachel. For putting you in the middle of all this." His voice cracked a little. "I didn't think any of this would matter. But it does. You do." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. "I thought you looked like her at first," he continued. "But you're nothing like her. You listen. You see people. You don't play games." I didn't expect to feel anything, but I do. Then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was soft, unsure, like he was afraid I'd pull away. And I did. Because no matter how warm that moment felt, it wasn't real. "Not yet. We're pretending, remember?" I whispered. He nodded slowly, backing away. "Yeah, pretending." But I saw the truth in his eyes. And it scared me more than anything else, because part of me wanted it to be real too. It was late, close to midnight, when I wandered down the hallway looking for a book to help me sleep. The lake house was still, wrapped in silence, but as I passed the study, I heard voices, low and angry. I paused, just outside the door, barely breathing. Charles and Marcus were inside. "You know Caleb was supposed to inherit," Charles said, voice sharp. "Well, he didn't, did he?" Marcus snapped. He walked away. He disappeared. I was the one who stayed. I cleaned up his mess when Rachel left him. He didn't leave. He grieved. "And you helped Rachel walk away from him," Charles growled. "You pushed her to marry you. Don't pretend your hands are clean." I leaned closer, heart pounding. "She was going to ruin him," Marcus said coldly. "She was making him soft. Emotional. That's not the kind of man who should run this family." "So you played him," Charles said. "Manipulated him into thinking she left because he wasn't enough." "He wasn't," Marcus replied. "And you know it." I stepped back, hand covering my mouth. Caleb had never told me any of this. He hadn't just been heartbroken, he'd been betrayed. by his own family. I waited until morning to tell him. We were sitting outside, the sun just beginning to rise, everything quiet except the birds and the soft wind off the lake. I heard them last night, I said gently. Charles and Marcus. They were arguing about you. About Rachel. The inheritance. Everything. Caleb didn't even look surprised. He just closed his eyes and rubbed the back of his neck. I know, he said after a long pause. You knew? I figured it out a while ago, he replied. After Mom died, Charles told me he'd changed the will. Said I was supposed to take over the property, the business, everything. But I didn't want it. Not after Rachel. Not after Marcus married her. But you didn't even try to fight for it. What would have been the point? He said quietly. My family decided who I was before I could prove anything different. I didn't want to be part of their game. I stared at him, trying to understand the calm in his voice. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even bitter. He just sounded tired. But why me, Caleb? I asked. Why ask me to pretend to be your fiancé? Why now? He hesitated. You looked like her, he admitted. At first, that's all I saw. I thought, maybe they'd believe I moved on if I showed up with someone like me, I repeated, the words stinging more than I wanted to admit. But then you weren't like her, he said. You listened. You stayed. And it wasn't just about pretending anymore. Still, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I had been chosen, not by accident, but by design. And I started to wonder if this had been a setup from the start. Brunch was supposed to be casual, eggs, fruit, fake smiles. But in the Hart family, nothing ever stayed light for long. We were sitting on the back patio, sunlight dancing on the tablecloth, when Marcus decided it was time for one of his little performances. He raised his glass, cleared his throat, and with that smug grin of his said, "To Caleb, for finally finding a woman who doesn't run the moment she sees who he really is." A few polite chuckles followed. Charles said nothing, just kept sipping his coffee. Ellen looked uncomfortable. Rachel looked down at her plate. And Caleb, his face went still. Not angry, not sad, just blank. Like he'd learned how to disappear without leaving. Something inside me snapped. I reached for my water glass, lifted it high, and said, "Actually, Caleb just proposed." The table went silent. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, but I didn't flinch. "Last night," I added, forcing a smile. "On the dock. It was perfect." Ellen's eyes widened. Rachel looked like she'd been slapped. Marcus scoffed, but before he could say a word, Caleb turned to me. "You sure you want to do this?" he whispered, so low only I could hear. I nodded. "Let's give them a show." He stood up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. The ring inside was delicate and beautiful, the kind that looked like it had a story. He knelt down beside me, right there in front of everyone, and slid the ring onto my finger. His mother's ring. The table gasped. Ellen covered her mouth. Charles finally looked surprised. And Marcus, for once, didn't have anything to say. Caleb smiled up at me, but his eyes weren't smiling. "Now they'll leave us alone," he whispered. I smiled back and nodded, but deep down my stomach twisted. I didn't know what had just happened. I thought I was taking control, flipping the script. But the moment that ring touched my hand, something shifted. Caleb had been ready. He'd brought the ring. Had he planned this? Or had he simply been waiting for the right moment? After brunch, we slipped away into the woods behind the house. I stared at the ring on my finger. "You had it with you the whole time," I said. He shrugged. "It was my mom's. I carry it sometimes. That's all." "Caleb, is this still pretend?" He didn't answer right away. It was supposed to be. I looked at him. And now? He looked back at me and said nothing. That silence said more than words ever could. I had started this act thinking I was in control. Now I wasn't so sure, because the lines between fake and real were blurring fast. And I didn't know which of us was really pretending anymore. It happened later that evening. I was in the hallway upstairs, heading to the guest room, when Rachel called my name. I turned and saw her standing there, arms folded, eyes sharp but not unkind. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I hesitated. There had always been a strange distance between us. Tension that didn't come from jealousy or hate, just something unspoken. I nodded and followed her into the quiet sitting room at the end of the hall. She closed the door behind us. "I know you're not really engaged," she said bluntly. I didn't answer. "I'm not going to say anything," she added quickly. I need to tell you something." She sat down on the edge of the couch, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "I never wanted to leave Caleb," she said. "I loved him. I still don't know if I've ever really stopped." I stayed standing, heart pounding. "So why did you?" I asked. Rachel looked up at me, pain clouding her expression. "Because Marcus gave me a choice. Leave Caleb, or he'd tell Charles something that would destroy him. Something from their past. I don't even know what it was. But I believed him." My chest tightened. "He told me Caleb would lose everything. His name, his future, his chance at any kind of respect in this family," she continued. "I was young, scared, and stupid. I thought I was protecting him. I thought if I walked away, he'd be safe. But you married Marcus, I said quietly. Rachel nodded, shame flooding her face. It wasn't love. It was pressure. Marcus said if I married him, it would seal the story, make it believable, keep everything quiet. I was stuck. She took a shaky breath. Caleb never asked questions. He just let me go. He stopped fighting, moved out, dropped the inheritance, disappeared. The room felt too small, too heavy. I thought of all the quiet in Caleb's eyes, all the hurt he never spoke about. He didn't just lose a fiancée. He lost his place in the world. On purpose. For her. Rachel stood and walked toward me. I don't know what he's told you. I don't even know what you two really are. But I see how he looks at you. I swallowed. What do you mean? She smiled, a sad one. He loved me once. But the way he looks at you? He never looked at me like that. I didn't know what to say. My heart was tangled in too many truths. As I left the room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, Caleb's mother's ring still on my finger. It had started as a lie. But somewhere along the way, this fake story had begun to feel painfully, dangerously real. It all unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Charles had collapsed the night before. Chest pain, shortness of breath. The ambulance came, but he refused to be taken to the hospital. Bring the lawyer, he said instead. It's time. The next morning, the family gathered in the study. The atmosphere was grim. Charles sat upright in a leather chair, pale but stubbornly composed. His lawyer stood beside him with a folder and a serious face. I stood in the back of the room, unsure if I even belonged. The lawyer cleared his throat. As per Mr. Hart's revised will, the Hart estate, including properties, business shares, and financial assets, will be passed down to Caleb Hart, his second son. The silence was deafening. On one condition, the lawyer continued, that he is legally married by the end of this month. I froze. So did Caleb. What? Marcus barked. That's ridiculous. Charles didn't speak. He just watched. This is a joke, Marcus went on, standing next. He drags in some random woman off the street, pretends to be in love, and now you want to hand him everything? Rachel looked away. Ellen gasped. Aunt Judy muttered something under her breath. Marcus turned to me, pointing. She's playing you. You don't even know her. You're being manipulated by a gold digger and a coward. Caleb stood slowly. Don't talk to her like that. Why not? Marcus snapped. She's the reason you're here again. You show up after years of running away, and suddenly you're the perfect son. Caleb took a deep breath. I didn't come back for this. Then what did you come back for? Charles finally spoke. Caleb looked at him. Closure. Peace. To prove I wasn't broken. And now you want the estate? Charles asked. Caleb shook his head. No, I never did. I still don't. The room went silent again. I don't want your money, he said, voice steady. I don't want the house or the land or the name. I never came here to win anything. I just wanted to show you that I could be okay without all of this. His words cut deeper than any argument. Marcus scoffed. Then what's this all been for? A performance. I looked around the room, suddenly feeling dizzy. Everyone staring, judging, deciding whether I was part of the act or part of the plan. I stepped back. I never agreed to be a pawn, I said quietly. Hannah, Caleb started, reaching for me. But I shook my head. I don't even know what's real anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of their voices fading behind me. My chest ached, not just from the tension, but from something else. I had come here to help someone. Now I wasn't sure if I'd been helping, or if I was just another piece on their family's chessboard, and I wasn't going to be played anymore. Back in my small apartment, everything felt quieter than I remembered. The soft hum of the fridge, the creak in the hallway floor, even the ticking of the clock on the wall. It all felt louder now that the storm was over. I stood at my kitchen counter, holding the velvet box in my hand. Inside was the ring, his mother's ring, the one he had slid onto my finger in front of his family, in front of the lie we'd both agreed to. I stared at it for a long time before finally placing it back inside and closing the lid. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of not knowing what was real. A soft knock came at the door. I knew it was him before I even looked through the peephole. Caleb stood there, his hands deep in his coat pockets, hair messy from the wind. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, they didn't try to hide. I figured I owed you more than a goodbye in a house full of strangers, he said quietly. I stepped aside and let him in. We stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by silence. I didn't plan for it to go that far, he started. When I asked you to pretend, it really was just one dinner. I nodded. And the ring? The lake house? The fake proposal? He looked down, ashamed. I panicked. Marcus was pushing. My father was watching. And then you stepped in and defended me, and for a moment it felt real. I swallowed hard. So why me, Caleb? Really? He looked up at me, and I saw the answer before he spoke. Because you looked like her. Rachel, he admitted. At first, that's all I saw. You reminded me of her so much. It felt like fate. I thought maybe I could fix something through you. I closed my eyes. The truth hurt more than the lie. But then, he continued, you weren't her. You were you. You asked questions, you listened, you stayed. You saw things no one else did. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being a replacement. I looked at him, my heart twisting, but I still was one. At the beginning. That's what you saw when you looked at me. He didn't argue. I can't be someone's almost, Caleb, I said. Not again. His face softened, like he understood more than he wanted to admit. He stepped back just a little. I'm sorry, Hannah, he whispered. For all of it. I nodded, blinking away the tears I refused to let fall. Goodbye, Caleb. He lingered for a second, then turned and walked out. No promises. No more pretending. And just like that, the door closed behind him. For real this time. Weeks passed. The world outside my apartment moved on. People went to work, drank coffee, laughed in the streets. But inside, I felt stuck in place, like my heart was still somewhere between the lake house and my front door. I tried to distract myself with work, with books, with noise. But every time I saw the closed ring box on my shelf, the ache returned. Then one quiet morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, just my name in soft, looping handwriting I recognized instantly. Aunt Judy. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands as I opened it. Dear Hannah, Charles passed away last night. He went quietly, with fewer regrets than I expected. He asked for Caleb, but Caleb didn't come. I paused, breathing in. Caleb didn't want the inheritance. Again, he signed it all over to Ellen, saying she was the only one who ever understood the weight of that name. Ellen cried. Charles didn't fight it. Enclosed is something Caleb left for. Tucked inside the envelope was a photo. A simple print, grainy from a phone camera. It showed Caleb in the middle of a clearing, hammer in hand, sleeves rolled up, sawdust in his hair. Behind him, the frame of a new cabin stood tall against a line of trees. He looked peaceful, alone but not lost. On the back of the photo, written in his handwriting, were just a few words. This time, I want to build something real. If you ever want to stop pretending, come find me. I held the photo for a long time. Not because I was unsure, but because I already knew. That afternoon, I dug through my closet, pulled out the rolled-up blueprints I hadn't touched in years, the ones for a little dental practice I used to dream about owning, right next to a home built by hand. I hadn't dared look at them since the last time someone told me I wasn't enough. But now, I saw them differently. The next morning, I packed my bag, wore my oldest jeans, my worn boots, drove hours through winding roads, past lakes and fading leaves. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from nerves, but from hope. When I found him, he was sanding a window frame, whistling softly to himself. He looked up. Our eyes met. I didn't say anything, just stepped out of the car, mud clinging to my boots, and held up the rolled blueprints in my hand. He smiled, not the tired, guarded smile from before, but something new, something real. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no fireworks, no dramatic kisses in the rain, just two people standing in the dirt, choosing each other with eyes wide open. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. What about Caleb? Do you think he made the right choice by letting go of the money and walking away, or should he have stayed and fought harder for what was his? I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if heartfelt stories like this speak to you, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.